Hi, Casey.
Hi, Kyla. So good to be here with you.
So nice to have you here. I know we just were chatting a little bit before I hit record, but another little check-in here is yeah, how are you doing? What's present for you today? What's today?
Good question. I feel like I'm kind of reorganizing and kind of grounding in. We had some travel last weekend, and so that's always kind of just a little just unsettling. And then coming back home, and I feel like I'm just today feels like it's about arriving and in so many ways, but just kind of arriving fully here. So I feel like I'm doing that bit by bit in practical ways, energetic ways, all of that. So yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh,
What's alive for you?
oh, thank you. Thank you for asking. I was co-facilitating a retreat this weekend in like the beautiful forests of where I live in Vancouver Island. We were kind of like maybe we were sort of 2 hours from the city and 3 nights and working with a bit of plant medicine and breath work. And it was so incredible. And we host them often. I think it was our eighth or ninth time running these together as a team. And
Amazing.
I leave these weekends, like, even though I'm not in the receiving, technically, quote unquote, the receiving side, it's like, wow, I've received so much. So the first day home, it's like similar to you, like finding my feet, grounding back in. Okay, is this real life?
Yeah.
What? Yeah. So kind of, yeah, really landing in from that. So even with that, I do excuse my brain as like a little floaty.
Yes. I
It's
know the
still,
feeling. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it feels really, really good.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, happy to be grounded with you or to float with you either way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So, the one and only question that I actually ask my guests that is guaranteed is what are you reclaiming?
Mm. I feel like the theme that I've noticed for myself really this year feels like truth, right? Like a vulnerability or an authenticity, but what I think is even deeper than that that feels really present for me is it's just the truth, right? So
Mhm.
really connecting to that in a deeper way, right? And I'm really kind of pushing myself, whatever shields or armor we put up, masks that we wear. I feel like I'm trying to push through that and not necessarily in a way that is vulnerable because that's it, but it's not quite it. It just actually feels like it's really true. So I
Mhm.
feel like that's been a theme that I've noticed that's been kind of emergent for me this year, and I imagine it will continue to be. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Beautiful.
how about for you?
Oh God. Many things. Many things. The podcast originated with me reclaiming, well, it was a part of my process of reclaiming my voice
Hmm.
as a woman, as a business owner, as a being. There's so many layers to that. And currently, if I was to think like in this moment, yeah, let me just sit with that. Mm. Maybe like my knowingness. Confidence doesn't feel like quite the right word. My like similar, I guess, truth. My knowing, right? Like in any moments where there's a hesitation of should I say this? Should I support that way? Should I do this? Should I put this out there? Should I ask? It's just like if it's felt, yes. Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I love the way, I mean, I think there is such a theme that women, especially kind of in this healings, but like this journey that we go on, is really, really similar. It's the reason I don't have a podcast. But I love to come on other people's podcasts. And for me, it's been very, very similar, like reclaiming that voice for myself that I would maybe like to shrink or hide or be a little, invisible, even though that can feel like an injury. And so it's similar. And they feels to me like they weave together this truth, this voice, like there is a synchronicity that isn't just about us knowing it ourselves, but us being confident enough, right, to stand in that truth with ourselves, but also with community, right? And there's
Hmm.
something beautiful that happens when we step into that. So
Yeah.
sounds like we're on similar paths. I love that.
Yeah. And with that, like when, if you can even pinpoint, like when in your life did that become present for you? When was there that maybe it was a shift, maybe it was a really slow transition, but can you remember when you kind of came into that reclamation, I guess, for lack of better term?
Well, I think I've probably been reclaiming it for a really long time. I can sense when I don't know if I can sense exactly when I lost it, but I don't know. I think that this has been kind of a lifelong journey of us doing that in general, right? Where we just kind of lose some of those parts. And I have really sensed it in like the last year for myself, that it's like, okay, I'm ready to step out. These things that I might have still felt or held shame around or just wanted, like although I have maybe an issue with visibility, I have wanted to just like reclaim that power in that way. I think when it happened for me is really lined up as much work as I did to this point lined up with the partnership that I got in when I really actually felt like on a nervous system level safe.
Mm-hmm.
And there was only so much kind of in that relational framework that, or being independent and in other relationships or whatever that would be, there was only so much I could really acquire in terms of that. And there needed to be this kind of co-regulation where my nervous system could actually settle and feel safe. And I think that there was a piece about that for me that finding, um, this like divine partnership for me allowed me to really kind of settle in all these other ways. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I did entirely on my own, right? It's not like, I was doing that with him, but I think feeling the backboard of that support and that safety in a way that really had been absent for me for a really long time allowed me to maybe not have to in my nervous system grip so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was subtle, right? It wasn't like right away that happened,
Mm-hmm.
but the way that I've noticed that has transformed me, that went beyond any and all the healing, so much healing that I had done before that, but there was just something so intrinsic that was available to me after that happened. So that's what I would say. How about you?
Yeah, I really, really relate to that in terms of, and I don't know if I would have even thought that it would happen in this order. I think there was sort of this, correct me if I heard you right, but it sounded what I heard, it sounded like a big piece of what allowed you to like step into this, like, yes, this is mine. I'm calling this in, I'm reclaiming this, was a safe, stable partnership. Yeah.
Mm.
And
Yep.
so I think old me assumed that I had to be, I'm going to use language that I maybe isn't like the best language or what I really, really mean, but I almost had to be like uh, healed, or I had to be like perfectly, everything needed to be sorted out
Yeah.
before I could create the space for this divine, wonderful partner to come in.
Yep.
And that's just not the case, I don't believe. What I did is I had been in, years of self-work and self-knowing and learning and evolving and like shoveling through the layers and trusting. I think this is the piece that actually allowed it for me is trusting that I am doing enough, I am enough, I am perfectly whole as I am.
Mhm.
And all of this process work that I'm doing is not indicating that I am broken or not whole.
Mm.
And it was when that became known to me, this beautiful partnership that I'm in sort of entered into my life, and it has been such a healing relationship for me in all areas of my life.
Mm.
In all areas of my life, this partnership, it's so beautiful and strong, and it's the first time I've been held in a space where I can be in my trusting feminine and my like receivership
Yep.
with a really solid masculine. I've always sort of played the role of both, mostly the masculine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because of that, I haven't even been able to, like, coming back to the knowingness of being a woman, I wasn't even able to tap into that. I
Hmm.
wasn't able to reclaim all of the pieces of my feminine being because I was really pretty full time in my masculine.
Yeah.
And so similar to you, it's been in this last sort of year for me where I have felt like really held. I can lean back and like, okay, what is here for me? And feel safe enough to then go in and explore those new pieces of myself. New, I mean ancient, but new to me.
Yes, right. I
Mhm.
love that for you. That I mean,
Mhm.
I just couldn't agree with that more. And it was as if, we can do all of that healing, but some of it I just think has to happen in the relational container. That,
Mhm.
we can do so much, but it's the kind of surrender of that. It's the acceptance that I've done as much as I can. And then really that opens us up to be really ready to
Mhm.
receive, attract, all of that to come into our life. And
Mhm.
then that relational framework, that container that can provide, if it really is this sacred partnership.
Mhm.
And wouldn't it be um, that it can sort of reflect that back? And so that really kind of took me over the threshold in a way um, that maybe I sensed that I needed, but I hadn't really fully known until I experienced it. And it's like everything can just fully relax and in every way of your life, I notice.
Mhm.
For me, that's what it really is. I don't know, what the attributes are for you, but relationships I had been in prior, I hadn't really had this sense that I do now, that the things that I truly like, if I look inward and reflect on who I am and what I love the most about who I am, that in this partnership, that is seen and known and celebrated, and not
Mhm.
in this you know uh overt way. But that's the quality that I notice is the most special about it, is just I really feel like the things that I love the most about myself, that really make me unique in the way that I see it, and I'm really proud of, those are the same things that are reflected back to me, like he sees those things.
Mhm.
And so it's the first time that I've really had that experience, especially since I've kind of awakened myself and gotten to know myself, right? I wasn't super conscious in relationships, but
Mhm.
even like just before this relationship, like I just didn't have that. Like, yeah, like they might have liked something about me, but it wasn't the things that I like the most about myself. And so that's what really stands out. And I'd be curious to hear what that is for you, because I'm like, there's something so um, I don't know, complete about that really
Mhm.
allows me to settle in my nervous system as well. What is it for you?
First of all, I just really love how you said all of that. And of course having someone who like sees and loves your favorite pieces of self is only going to help brighten that part of you. It's so beautiful. For me, mhm, the first thing that comes to my mind is there's this sense of hmm, for me, well, yeah, for most of my life I've been really hyper independent and the more I know through my work now, I'm like, well, it's not such a, that wasn't all such a great idea. And it
Yeah.
all, rooted from a place of need. And there's many layers there. So, yes, hyper independent, which sure has served me in some ways and has not served me in some ways. And hmm, having my partner now who's like such a go-getter and incredibly motivated and incredibly driven and incredibly passionate about everything, his work, his play, his people, his wellness, his everything.
Mm,
It's mm, there's something there that's allowed me, and yeah, it's the first time I've said this and I'm not, so I'm like working through it as I say it, but it's almost like I've been able to like pull back from my need to do everything so intensely.
mhm,
And so I actually feel really taken care of, even if what he's working hard at or moving forward in has nothing to do with me.
mhm,
There's just I can see that like, okay, he's got it. He's got it. And so
mhm.
there's this real sense of protection,
Yeah.
um, support, and like kind of yeah, like warrior energy. And my partner like kind of speaks to that a lot. Like this like I got it, and not from a place of fight or not from a place of fear, not like a scary warrior, but like, I love you. This is what I want. We're solid. This is what I want, and I got it. And
Mhm,
I'm gonna take care of it. And so I just there's just such a sense of safety,
mhm,
um, mhm, like physical safety and emotional safety, and because he's so driven, it's allowing me to I'm inspired all
mhm,
the time. And again, in previous relationships, being the more masculine, being the one that was like doing all the things. And, I've been an entrepreneur literally my whole life. I've only ever worked for myself.
mhm.
There's so much pressure with that. I mean, it's beautiful, and there's a lot of pressure to
Yep.
do the things. And I'm still an entrepreneur and I'm still doing that. And again, being with someone, sharing a space with someone who is also doing that, again, it's like it's deeply inspiring, and it's like I can take my foot off the gas a little bit. I don't know if this even makes sense, but it's definitely making sense in my mind. I don't have to work so hard
Yeah.
because we're working hard like together.
I love that for you again, and I totally agree. I mean, I
Mhm.
relate to that completely. I have also, been really in that years of independence, over, kind of overcorrecting and being in my masculine, and it's like I can really surrender. I often talk about this because I, literally was this archetype for so long, but that independence, which so often, I think of this on a spectrum, right? As independence is, on one end of the spectrum and empowerment is on the other. And sometimes they'll feel like they're closer, but they're actually really in polarity to one another.
Mhm.
And so I'll talk to other women, right, who are similar, right? And most, women, I don't know how old you are. I'm in my early 40s, but we'll kind of take on that, especially if we've been business owners or single or any of those things, right? We can really
Mhm.
take on that masculine quality. And yet it's in total contrast. That independence is actually in total contrast to empowerment, right? And that
Yeah.
liberation. And so it's been fascinating that I've noticed that too, even in my business, right? I mean, just where I have felt, responsible for it all financially and otherwise. Um,
Mhm.
it's like I can ease back because I have somebody who's equally driven, but really embodied in his healthy masculine, right? And it
Mhm.
allows me to really approach my business even differently, which is still driven, but I feel like it's like removed some element that would make it not quite what it could be in its like purest form, the way that I
Mhm.
practice. And so it's really beautiful because it gives me the freedom to not have to have that independent energy and in any way that that would taint the way that I would show up in my practice or with my clients. It's like that's been removed as well, and I can really just show up in my true essence is what I've noticed. So it's fascinating. But again,
Mhm.
like we couldn't quite accomplish that if we didn't have this relational container, this framework that allowed the space to really, it's like we might even intellectualize and know that,
Mhm.
but to experience the embodiment of it, there's so much peace and freedom in it.
Yeah, you said the way you said that, and I've never actually heard it described that way, but independence and embodiment or empowerment being polar opposite. And I feel that like when you said that, I just tune into how I felt all of those years feeling that independent and I can do it all. And it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really beautiful. And I feel like that's a really good nugget for people listening. And then
Mhm.
something else that came to me when you were speaking is, as women in business or
Mhm.
women in general, but here we are in business, if we're acting constantly from that place of the masculine, and don't get me wrong, we need that in business. It's how we structure our business. But if we're functioning in that masculine energy all the time, right? That's very much heady. It's very much thinking. It's very much planning.
Yep.
And we're feminine beings.
Mhm.
And so we connect to our emotions, we connect to the feelings, we connect to the heart, we connect to the movement,
Hello.
the
Yep.
the energy of things, and we can't access that if we're constantly up in the head. And so what a magical shift to our business, or to, if it's maybe our business is our family. Maybe we don't have a, a business that we run, but maybe we run a family, which I think is a business
Right.
and probably harder. And what kind of magic could we bring to our businesses, to our life, if we were able to feel safe to tap into that feminine essence of ourselves and to bring the feelings and to bring the magic and to bring, like, there's so much there. And so
Mhm.
really just, speaking to the feminine beings who do find themselves in their thinking head and their masculine doing all the time. Like, it's okay to be there. We have to be there sometimes. And what can you do to invite yourself back into yourself? Because I know that there's like a like a ticking, really juicy, sweet, beautiful, healthy time bomb in there of your like magic, magic, magic that wants to come out once you embody that feminine aspect.
Yeah, and when we have the just to kind of expand on that, like when we have that masculine archetype that is, too flexed in our system, we block, we disallow that feminine essence to be really truly in flow, and we will justify right through I mean, I think there's a long time, and I'll hear women do this as well, and I know I for sure did. It's like we'll justify or we'll define, like, the narrative that we have around independence is always kind of tainted or flavored toward this really positive thing, right? And we have to really maybe look at it more holistically, more comprehensively, so that we can really understand that to anchor ourselves too much into that narrative that is just independence is that we're disallowing something else even more powerful inside of ourselves to emerge. And um
Mhm.
yeah, I and yet you kind of need to go through the transformation and the experience of that to really truly get it, right? And it's so powerful. There's something really, really quintessential that's available to us once we can do
Mhm.
that. So yeah.
I'm curious, and I don't know if I really don't know if anyone has the answer to this, but I'm curious your thoughts on it. You and I are around the same age. I think, yeah, early 40s.
Mhm.
And all of this information that we now hold in these beautiful ages that we are, I, it is available for everyone. I know that I wasn't ready to hear it or receive it or understand it when I was in my 20s, probably even in my 30s. It wasn't really until my late 30s that I really opened up. There's a lot of time, like even, the conscious world and spirituality. I've always been curious about it. And in my younger years, it was sort of like, oh yeah, that's really neat. And like believed it, but didn't trust it. Maybe there was like a miss. And I also thought it was like for other people,
Mhm.
and that I was separate than that. Or maybe it was even a little bit of like, I don't need that. Like,
Mhm.
kind of like, how teenagers think they know everything, almost that energy a little bit. Do
Mhm.
you like, I don't even really fully know my question, but something around the idea of like, how can we access this can we access this without going through the years of life experience? And, like, how can we make sure that people are like absorbing this information earlier? Or is it really, do you believe it is just an experiential thing and we have to experience what we experience?
I know that I did. I can only speak for myself. I know that I needed to experience it. I mean, could that timeline have been collapsed? Perhaps, right? Like sometimes there was frustration for me and even doubt and surrender. I mean, just so many levels of that in my own kind of awakening and evolution. But I think I really needed to. I mean, I noticed I would get quicker, right? I mean, I could have like really rapid, radical, fast experiences with maybe in my late 20s or my early 30s that would take, I mean, sometimes those experiences and those learnings, those teachings that I was getting from some more divine, like I would have to muddle through them literally for years sometimes. And then, by the end, by, this point, or the last few years, I've noticed I can just go through that really fast, like in a day, in an hour, in, whatever brief experience, right? I can actually move through it. And so I think I needed to move through it in that way. I'd be curious to hear what you think. Um And I think it's all perfect, right? Like I really do
Mhm.
trust that there is this divine timing and I needed more of that, right? Than maybe even, friends or family or clients that I've like some people do that on their own timeline and that's beautiful if they can rush it. But for me, it has been such an embodied learning,
Mhm.
an embodied teaching as I've gone through it that I really often talk about this, but I really feel like my own personal, like whatever education or trainings or like that is pales in comparison to the life experience I've had and the embodiment that I've kind of gone through. And I feel like
Mhm.
that's where I extrapolate really this wisdom. And I also feel like what it's given me is a real felt sense, which is what I think we're looking for, right? This like
Mhm.
really anchored, felt, grounded sense of security. So I can really trust what I'm experiencing and it doesn't
Mhm.
feel rocky, it doesn't feel shaky. It feels like, you know what, this is real. This is really solid,
Mhm.
whatever that is. And I don't just mean in relationship, but certainly that's one aspect of it where I can just arrive at that place of knowing in my
Mhm.
bones and it's this felt sense, right? That I think sometimes we could doubt or we could, not quite be as anchored in. And to me, again, that just feels like empowerment. Like it feels like
Mhm.
really solid and the things that are coming in, the life that I'm experiencing, everything just feels more anchored. And so I'm really grateful, right, for the whole journey, even though it felt like, at times a long one or that I was behind at certain kind of life cycles than a lot of the other people, right, that I could observe. Even clients, I would be helping clients with some of these things. And yet I would maybe feel like those qualities or those aspects felt a little elusive to me if I was being
Mhm.
honest, right?
Mhm.
And it's not really comparing or judging yourself to anyone because we all, have those experiences. And so I think I needed that. What do you would think?
I couldn't agree more. Like I absolutely couldn't agree more with everything you said. And the piece, I mean, case in point, I mean, I remember being in my early 20s and someone gifted me an Eckhart Tolle book. I think it was either The Power of Now or A New Earth, like what, one of the
Yeah.
quintessential first spiritual books anyone ever reads.
Yeah.
And it was given to me and by someone that I really trusted and respected and they really spoke highly about it. And I was grateful to receive it. And then I left it on my bookshelf for like 5 years. And I was like, not for me. And then it was like in and around my 27th birthday, a lot of stuff started to shift for me. And I found myself in a relationship where I could see myself being a not so great version of myself. I had this wonderful partner who I was treating like total garbage. I wasn't showing up as a good version of myself. I didn't want to be in the relationship. I didn't know how to say it, all the things. And it was my body was really showing me my word, like, wow, I was just becoming this like version of me.
Mhm.
And I recognized it and was like, everything needs to change. Like, this is not okay.
Mhm.
And the first step was reading that book that
Mhm.
was gifted to me. And I bring that up because I wasn't ready for that book 5 years ago. I
Mhm.
didn't, I, that book was like a foreign language to me. It did not interest me in the slightest. And then I think I read it in like a day. I was like gobbling it up.
Yeah.
And that just cracked open the door.
Mm.
And, I'm 40, I'll be 41 in July. So we're looking at like,
Mhm.
what, 13 years that I've been here. And I know that I'm still, well, I don't believe there's no end. There's like no end point here.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I'm like the wisdom that's still coming to me, the ahas, the wow, the moments of clarity of something that happened years ago where all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. So coming back to that perfectly timed, perfectly placed, I there's not much more that I think I would die on a hill for. Like everything, the most painful things, the most heartbreaking things are perfectly placed
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And it often isn't until, months, years later that you can understand that. And so maybe this is like our little pep talk to the women who are younger than us, who are in the process and like things aren't making sense and things feel sticky and hard, and maybe you're finding yourself in these looped patterns of like, why am I dating the same person? Why do I keep doing the same thing? Why are my friends treating me like crap and I just like kind of stick around? Why? It, keep asking.
Mm,
Yes, stay curious, and it's all going to start to unfold in the
mm,
time that is right for your journey. I could not, like, I've chills when I say that. I've had hard things in my life that in the moment, I think probably were like, why is this happening to me? This is so unfair.
yeah.
And now just like so grateful. And I see it. I get it. I see it. So, yes, wow, long-winded answer. I agree with everything you say.
Oh, beautiful. Well, no surprise. And it's so funny. I have to tell you this as you were telling your story about Eckhart Tolle. I had something so similar, right? I mean, I've been on this kind of awakening spiritual path for a long time now. And I had this real like aversion to his work. Truly, I had this like, I was just like, not only was I not interested, but I kind of like judged it a little bit.
Hmm.
I don't even know why, but I was not available for it. Right. And it's funny, he came through Seattle where I live and I had tickets. And actually, it was really funny too, because his show was like delayed by like, I had tickets and then it was like delayed, delayed, delayed. And I hadn't even really consumed all of his stuff. And so they postponed his show. It was like 2 years. And so
Oh,
finally, when it came around that it was time to see him, I cannot tell you. It's so funny. I was just like remembering this as you were talking about it. I was literally like on the edge of my seat. And if you've ever seen him talk,
I
whether it's
haven't.
on TV or YouTube or anything, he's just like very gentle and very slow. And his humor and the nuance in the way that he shows up, it's so subtle that if you weren't really alert, you would like miss it. But
Mhm.
it's so precious when you can see it. And so this was like really kind of my first time to be in like, and we were sitting like almost front row. And
Wow.
and I was just, I mean, not really front row, but like in the first 10 rows or something. And so I could just see all the little like expressions on his face and the subtlety of that. I was mesmerized by him in a
Mhm.
way that I was like, man, I have really been missing it. Or here, like I kind of didn't consume or absorb this or appreciate it, I guess, is a good word for it until this moment. And I'm just captivated. Like I'm on the edge of my seat. And you could tell even the person that I was with at the time, because I was with another partner at the time when I went to go see him years ago. And when like they weren't getting having the same experience that I was having, and it's all just so true, right? Like we just are where we are when we're there. And so it was perfect, right? But I love, the story that you're telling about that because I have my own little story about it. But yeah, and there was just something like I was just so endeared to his entire presence and I could fully absorb it and receive it, which I wouldn't have known or anticipated, right? Because I wasn't like a mass
Mhm.
consumer of Eckhart Tolle, but I'm like, wow, he is just a gem, really. So there's that I would say, but I also would notice this, like I think it's that embodiment of our own like intuition and truth as we were both talking about. Because there were times that I would really get that messaging along the way. And
Mhm.
my problem really that I came to understand about myself is that I was getting it. I was even picking up on the messages, but I wasn't necessarily doing what I needed to do to honor the messaging that was coming through. I wasn't listening. I was to
Mhm.
my intuition as deeply as I could have been. And that would manifest in all kinds of ways for me. A lot of times it would be for, I'd get like physically migraines. And what I came to learn years ago, the association between that is often if something like that was showing up, like to me, that was a clue that I wasn't really listening to my intuition. It could have been in the most subtle of ways, right? It's like, don't do that, or yeah, that doesn't, like any little messaging that could come through and it could trigger this migraine because it was just I was out of alignment and not honoring that in the way that I could. So could I have listened to that messaging more consciously and then taken the conscious right action to embody that? Sure. But I did it when I did it, right? I really learned
Mhm.
to listen when I learned to listen. And now I just have to operate right in that way. where I listen to that truth, right? That my
Mhm.
own truth center, that oracle within, that kind of knowing being inside myself. And that is, everything, right? Because it will always reflect your truth, right? Which might be different than somebody else's truth. And it might be a different timeline than, anybody else around you. And,
Mhm.
it's so important that we honor that. So that's,
Yeah.
my addition to that conversation, right?
Yeah. Oh, we've got a puppy behind me. So sweet. Yeah, and then that too, like, yeah, listening to your intuition is, wow, such a gift and also such a journey to get there for a lot of us, right? That was something that, again, I thought was for other people in my 20s and even in my 30s. I resisted it. I really thought that was for other people. And so, yeah, you speak to interesting that you speak to the migraines because I've been getting headaches lately. So part of me now is like, oh gosh, okay, what am I what am I not present to? What am I not listening to? So that's really interesting. Do you have like what supported you in getting in contact with your intuition, knowing that's what that was, trusting it, trusting yourself? Like what was that process like for you?
Well, a long journey, right? I mean, I felt so
Hmm.
disconnected from it for a long time because I probably put other people and their needs above, I mean, I fell into that very classic patterning of putting their needs above my own. And so I think there just was, I mean, I've struggled with that pattern and therefore migraines for, since I was a teenager, honestly. And then times that it would really kind of spike and peak. And I can look at, how, those timelines and how they line up with challenges in my life when I was really in patterns of doing that, like again, putting other people's needs, and which can be a balance, right? Because being a caring healer, right? Like you, of course, you are compassionate and empathetic to other people, and not giving that power totally away either. And so doing that. And then again, as we talked about, there's this like gross kind of overcorrection of that, where probably I was a little bit more independent and focused on self, and really having to strike that balance where you are not, in this deep need. But it's been a long time that I really have felt actually connected to my intuition. So I can do it really well for other people, but sometimes where I'll feel like I would fall short, like again, maybe in my early 30s, even late 30s, where I would fall short is like feeling disconnected when it came to my own stuff. Like I could do it really well again for others, but my own stuff, I wasn't maybe as embodied in that, or I would still have these tendencies that would dislocate me from that. And so, um, I felt like I could listen to the messages and I would really actually receive that. But where I got stuck for my own self, and of course, we all have our own systems and messaging boards and ways that that comes through. Although I think there can be similarities, but your headaches may have nothing to do with that. You have to tune into your own system and identify that, right? But
Yeah.
for me, what I noticed when I noticed that correlation was really empowering, right? Because it was really on the action. It was taking action, the conscious right action, that where I was being held up. It's like I would actually I had the awareness, I would have the intuition about whatever it was, and I would be actually pretty clear about what that message was, but I would still be catering to other people, or putting their needs first, or not, some combination of that, where I wasn't necessarily taking the conscious right action that would align with what the messaging was, even if it wasn't convenient for me or for anybody else. And
Mhm.
so what I had to learn, that's the piece that I think I struggled with and that I've really embodied, is the intuition itself. I felt like has come through for a long time, but the embodiment of that, where I would take the conscious right action, whether it was convenient for anybody else or not, or myself or not, right? It really kind of pushed me kind of over this um, threshold that I needed to cross to actually, like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. And so say it and honor it. That could be work, not wanting to work with a certain client.
Mhm.
And the subtle, it's like, oh, but no, I don't want to, hurt their feeling, or they're here for, it's like, actually, it just actually doesn't, it's not an energy alignment. It's not personal. It's not any of that, but it doesn't work. Or that could be in a personal relationship, right? It's like, oh man, I'm dating a great guy, and I'm talking about before this relationship, like, nothing really wrong here, but it's there's something missing, and thinking, oh, but let's keep trying, let's keep doing it, right? Let's see if if it's not broken, don't fix it or whatever. And so it's
Mhm.
really just learning that I know myself, I know what it feels like when I feel whole and healthy in my body, right? Like when I've arrived at that place of my own baseline that just is neutral and good and all is well, right, in the world. And I want to feel that as often as possible. I want to arrive back to that place. If I'm dislocated from it, I want to come back to it again and again and again. And I think the way that we do that is by taking the conscious right action when we listen to what our knowing being tells us. And so it's practice, right? It's doing it wrong so many times and recognizing what impact that has. And
Mhm.
I can, be a sensitive kind of energy being too. And so I can like really feel even like the slightest, expression of that. I can feel it when I'm out of alignment. And so it's learning just to be really impeccable with my integrity and what is true for me, what my own value system, and listening and then honoring that for myself, which is, again, not selfish, but I tell people all the time, I call that self-honoring. It's like, how can I be
Mhm.
self-honoring, which ultimately is honoring everybody else that you could, come in contact with, right?
Yeah.
Because that again, it's just true. So
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. I feel like that reminds me a little bit. I talk a lot about what I feel to be like the two primary feeling states, which is expansion and contraction,
yeah, yeah,
and getting really familiar with what those feel like and when they
yep,
show up,
yep,
and always following the expansion.
right,
And noticing those contractions as like, oh, those are yellow flags. Those are yellow or red flags. Like
yeah,
those are right.
yep,
And that might, that doesn't mean that we only do the things that are exciting and good. It might be if a question or an opportunity is posed, or there's maybe it's a relationship. It's like, okay, if I think about staying, I'm going to stay, and notice what that feeling is. And if it's a sense of contraction, yes, the harder thing might be to leave, but
mm,
that is going to be leading you into that expansion space. And to me, that's a really like tangible, interesting way that we can play with our intuition, just play with that knowingness in the body, is
yes,
really learning to. And I started practicing that when I would go to a coffee shop. So this is when I was first learning, like, come back, like you can trust yourself, Kyla. Is
yeah,
I would go to a coffee shop because my biggest struggle in a coffee shop is, do I get an iced latte or a hot latte? Like that's always my struggle. And so
yep,
I would like place my hand on my solar plexus. I would close my eyes and I would feel into the energy of, okay, iced latte. And I would just notice how my body responds to that. Okay. Hot latte. Oh. And like
mm,
sometimes in expansion, and especially in that sense, for me was like a softening, like a melting, like, oh,
yep, yep,
versus a tightening or a rigid rigidity or that uplift, right? It's that softening. And so
yeah,
really learning to listen to your body and
yes.
follow that
Yeah,
body
follow
language.
that subtle messaging, but it's always present, right? And
Mhm.
it doesn't need to get to this place where it's like screaming at us if
Mhm.
we listen to the nuance and the small little like things that you know most people just kind of jump over, or you're not paying attention because there can be this cumulative effect, right, of
Mhm.
the contractions that we dislocate. Again, I feel like we separate ourselves
Yeah.
from that knowing when we dishonor, or we're not even making the practice. But I think that's a beautiful practice, and a great way to uh, make it tangible and accessible to a lot. And I, describe it in very, very similar terms. I love, the expansion and contraction, because at its simplest form, you just have to slow down and be present enough to really
Mhm.
into what that is. But when you do, the answers are available, and the more you practice it, there's, no question you're getting better and better and better at it. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful practice, and I love even that example, right, with that might seem like little stuff. It might seem tedious for people when they're just starting, right? It's like, oh, if I'm doing this, but what is the benefit if you actually do live your life in this way where you spend the time to really be fully present to everything,
Mhm.
then you get clarity. And then, the other thing that I would say about that's really beautiful is it doesn't mean that, to your point, that you want a hot latte every time over an iced latte. Like, it's that ability, the process that you can learn to download into your system and
Mhm,
listen to. And the answers may change. And
mhm,
so it may be that next time you can really listen and understand that, oh, an iced latte is really what feels beautiful to me right now. And that's
mm,
what's expansive. And so it's not, there's no rigidity, but it's just a lot of flow in it, and your
yeah,
ability to overlay that into your own nervous system and body, and way of operating means that you'll never not be able to answer that. All right. You'll always have that accessible to you. And so you can't ever go wrong. Right.
mhm,
Like,
mhm.
yeah.
And you've used the word subtleties a few times. You used it even when you were speaking about Eckhart, how he speaks, and
Mhm.
those subtle little, nuances that he has. And it's funny, this was such a big talking point in the retreat this past weekend is the potency in the subtleties.
Yeah.
And we're such a busy culture. We're hustling, we're moving, we're fast, we're multitasking. There's screens, we're on our phone, we're talking to people, we're writing things down, like we're so busy that we miss it. And
We,
so it makes a lot of sense, at least to me, it makes a lot of sense that we might feel like, oh, I can't listen, I can't hear my intuition. I don't even know what's there. Okay,
mhm.
so what happens when we slow down? And
Yeah.
yeah, do you need to stand in a coffee shop and tune in every time? And do I really have the time for that? Yeah, maybe you do. Maybe
Mhm.
you do. And that's a really important way that you can be spending your time. Yeah, maybe you do just take an extra 17 seconds at your
Yeah.
coffee order.
I love it. It's reminding me, actually, when you were saying that, it was reminding me, I saw some, not that I know this person at all, but it's like literally something that I would do. I saw something on Instagram. It was like a meme or somebody of this guy, and he's standing in the grocery store and he's got his pendulum, and he's like testing food. He's like testing what would work for him. And I'm like, oh, that's something totally I would do. I mean, I've never lived without a pendulum, but it's just like listening to that. And whoever posted the meme, they said something like, these are my kind of people or something. This is my kind of way of shopping. But it's like, we actually, this oracle is with us all the time and coming and arriving in the present moment, which is so Eckhart Tolle, right? But it's like really taking the 17 seconds that it would take to spin your pendulum or tune in and notice what expands or contracts. Like, how could your life be so much better because you are just really in the now, and so much more, you're more alive when you do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
every is available to you, and more becomes available to you when you live in that way, and you free yourself up from whatever, heaviness or constraints or pain or stress or whatever it is, ways that your body and brain life, right, expresses in that. It's like so much more is available if you actually curate the time to do that and
Mhm.
tune in this way. So I love that.
I love that too. That's funny. Um, we haven't talked about your work, and I'm curious. I want to know a little bit about how you work with clients and how, because I trust that all of this is very related to how you work with your amazing clients. So now that we're
Yeah.
almost an hour in, can we talk about that?
Sure. So I have a spiritual psychology practice, which so I, often talk about this kind of came through. The way that I would conceptualize that the best is clinically trained, mystically guided. And so I
Mm,
really use my intuition in the way that I work with people. And my favorite sessions, right, with people or individuals are the ones who are kind of open to that. There is really kind of
mhm,
a flow, and they're available, because when we can tap in, I'm doing it all the time, whether they know it or not. Like, if somebody shows up and they just really want to talk more like clinical stuff, although I don't tend to attract people, that work that way. Like, I've been in
mhm,
practice long enough, and most people, we're not really mired in that psychology Western framework, right? So my favorite way to work is just, I'm really like meeting your energy. And I think there's a contract when you sign up to work with me that I'm like holding that. And there is a way, probably you're getting a sense, as we've talked about different things, that I really absorb and experience so much of the world through my body. And I've
mhm,
learned to do that in, times that felt like a real burden to me. But the ways that I hold space for people is really beautiful, because I can literally hold this container and mirror back to you. I can feel what you're feeling. I can feel where trauma might be stuck. I can feel all of those things, right, in my body. And I want to help people to, I locate that stuff, Even if it's just energetic for like the moment, the session, right? It might not
Mhm.
even be something that you think that you're chasing, right? But I'll feel it. And then if they're having trouble accessing that, or they're not as conscious as I am about it, then I will, reflect that back to them and have them notice how they can, locate that. And then I want to ultimately teach people how to do this for themselves, right? So that you don't
Mhm.
need me. But then we'll move the energy and we'll just keep moving. I call it tracking the energy. So we'll just kind of keep moving through. And if I can reflect some deeper kind of intuition that I'm sensing about you, then I will do that, right? If it's appropriate. But I
Mhm.
want you to arrive to that yourself. And so that's kind of just the way that I work with things. It's like I'll get downloads and imprints and impressions of things, and I want to help you move it. So one thing that I've talked a lot about, and anybody who does nervous system work knows, right? There are these a lot of times when I'm doing this kind of energy shamanic type, quantum work with people, I'll just like yawn, 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 or I'll be burping, or I'll
Mhm.
be doing all of these things, which ultimately are telling me two things when I'm working with clients. Number one, we're on the right track. And number two, we're moving the energy. Like it's actually
Mhm.
shifting out of you. So it's happening through me. And I'll, just remind people, but it's so interesting because anybody who knows anything about nervous system work, and I know, of course, you know all of that, but it's like we have these subtle releases that really indicate
Mhm.
that we've kind of down regulated in our nervous system. And so it's fascinating to me because this isn't something like I trained to do. It just happens. Right. And
Yeah.
so this beautiful kind of mirroring of when I'm working with people, it like really is, again, another intuition hit. And not that it happens that way for everybody, but again, if we were doing like somatic exercises, or polyvagal, anything like that, right? It's like we literally want to look for those things where you're having these nervous system releases where it's a sigh or a yawn or
Mhm.
anything that's kind of demonstrating to you that your body is actually shifting into a different state. And so when we're doing this work, kind of incorporating that, which of course I always have that like psychology framework and that um, structure right in the background of my thinking, and my working and my being, that's just kind of downloaded at this point. But it's beautiful because it feels like this holistic way of working with people offers just something even more, again, expansive for them.
Mhm.
So we can work faster, we can get deeper, we can move things. People don't come to me usually as a first line, if they're just starting therapy and they're thinking about it that way. It's like this is the more advanced stuff, right? People who need to, who want to go deeper, who have tapped out on other, things that they've already done and healing. And would be just a
Mhm.
different way to access that. So that's kind of what my work, looks like. Although no two sessions are alike, right? I mean, when you're
No.
kind of working in this realm, that's what's fascinating to me too, is I get to work with people. A lot of people that I'll work with too tend to be, people who are maybe Western practitioners, doctors, nurses,
Mhm.
psychiatrists, and they're trying to figure out how to incorporate more of a holistic bent into their practice. So those are people that I,
Amazing.
yeah. And then honestly, like for, whatever reason, really kind of high performance individuals. So people who are driven, right, who are
Mhm.
successful in their own right, and they're looking to maximize that, or actually go to maybe the next level. Those tend to be people that, I attract, right? Just,
Mhm.
people who are already driven, because I tend to be, driven in that way. It's like I always want to go to the next level and the next. I'm a seeker. I'm a,
Mhm.
optimizer in those ways. And so I tend to attract a lot of people who, are wired in those ways and really extraordinary, in
Mhm.
many, many, forms, but they're just kind of looking to optimize something else. So yeah.
Fascinating. I love the clinically trained and mystically guided. That made me very happy to hear. That's
Uh,
such a cool way to say it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just downloaded for me one time. I'm like, yeah, this is like the best way that I can like tagline what I do. Uh,
Hmm.
and carry that out because it is unique. It's definitely unique.
It is. And I think that's so, I mean, well, it's great for business. It's very unique. And, I feel like this realm of, spirituality and quantum healing and energetics, and it's very familiar and comfortable for me and for you and for a lot of people actually listening to this conversation right now. And it's still really out there for some people. And so to have the clinically trained in there, like to
Yes.
have that actual background
Mhm.
is going to be incredibly supportive for a lot of people. It's going to give them that sort of safety net if they feel like they need it. And then what a gift to be able to step in and receive what we know to be like the most magical work.
Agreed.
And
Yeah.
then, and then the ripples go out, right? You've got this everyday average Joe dad who goes home and he's like, "Holy cow, you'll
Mhm.
never guess what happened." And then, his friend goes or his wife goes, and then it's like, "Oh my gosh, okay, what is this?" And it's just such a beautiful way to share this work.
Agreed. I love, like, especially those people that didn't even know that they needed this, but there was some
Mhm.
degree of openness, right? And they're not necessarily seeking. It's like those are the people that might have really actually been somewhere, on a tipping point, right? But you can really kind of help expand them into something so much. And to your point, I think that sometimes people will come in and what makes them feel that you're credible, right, will be this clinical aspect, but where all the magic actually happens is in this other realm. And
Yeah.
um, so it's really beautiful, and I love that because it's like if you can take somebody who didn't really, that's fascinating. Actually, even in my own relationship, something that I love is, this man who I am with is really just a simple guy, like a Midwest guy, like really simple, really, practical and logical in all these ways. And he's had his own kind of awakening and near death experiences, which have opened him up. Not to circle around to that, but it's like those kinds of people that have opened
Mhm.
him up to really understanding that had he not had those experiences, I don't think he could really understand. I mean, he said it actually, like he couldn't
Yeah.
really understand or appreciate me or the way that I just operate, but because he's had those experiences again, that makes us
Mhm.
just really work, right? Even though there's a
Mhm.
lot of differences, but there's this really beautiful synchronicity. And I love having that experience with clients too, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
and they trust it themselves, right? It's not like I'm, creating anything that they have to decide, do I believe that or not? It's like,
Mhm.
you'll know it. You'll experience it and you'll know it. And
Mhm.
that belongs entirely to you. And so it's really cool to witness people, I guess, on that precipice, right? Of something so much bigger. I love it. So
So powerful.
mm,
And to like quote the podcast, like that is a reclamation. There's so many. I mean, we have reclamations all the time, but like, oof, that is such an empowering moment for them.
yeah.
Really, I mean, it changed their whole life, right? It could really truly change the trajectory of everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, if you're already like, imagine that if you're already exceptional and you've explored a lot, to have a space, right? Or have this access inside yourself where you can actually, like light beam out of that. It's like
Hmm.
pretty cool. Like that's the zone I want to live in, right? So,
Hmm.
yeah.
And I find too, well, yeah, from the people that I've experienced, those high achievers that you're working with,
Mhm.
they've been, I trust, like head down, grinding, doing the thing, making my magic happen, and like checking off the boxes and getting their businesses and their whatever they have like into a good place.
Yep.
They've been in their head a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
so for you to offer them these experiences to, yeah, wow. I imagine it's for some, they've probably never experienced anything like it.
Well, there's not a lot of space left to go, like when you're already that successful, or even, like I said, because I'll have, psychiatrists or doctors or
Hmm.
people like that come to work with me. And it's like, man, they're like really like they've achieved and they've really been
Hmm.
very heady about it for sure. But where else, like how can you expand beyond all of that, like what you've accomplished? And so it's really, really cool because this kind of it's a gateway, right? It's a
Hmm.
gateway to have more than you've already done. And it's fascinating too, because I will say I didn't have like, this has all just been kind of like the energetic that I am just reflecting that I've noticed has shown up for me. So for whatever reason, that's part of my blueprint. I didn't
Hmm.
like seek to help these specific type of people, but what I've noticed in patterns is that's actually who comes. And so I'm,
Hmm.
okay, this is part of the blueprint of the people that I'm,
Yeah.
and of course I'm always open to helping, anybody. There are magical, gifted people, who are stay-at-home moms, and there's all kinds of, people. You don't have to be in just that
Mhm.
arena, but yeah, it's amazing. Like there are definite patterns. I don't know if you notice that too. There are definite patterns of the people that I tend to attract for whatever reason. And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
I just have to pay attention to
Mhm.
this. And somehow that must be part of my blueprint that I'm meant to
Mhm.
do and works really well. So yeah.
Celebrating that. Thank you for the
Yeah.
good work. Do you work just in person or do you work online with people?
Oh no, I do have my office still.
Mhm.
I have kept that all these years.
Mhm.
And I still go in one day a week. And so obviously that would be here in the
Mhm.
Seattle area. But I mostly work virtually because I work with people all over the world. Again, when you're
Yeah.
doing kind of work in this way, you want to work with aligned people. And so it doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah.
The energy, exchange works perfectly wherever you are.
Mhm.
So I work with
Mhm.
people all over, mostly virtually in
Yeah.
Zoom or telephone. So yeah.
Beautiful. So we'll take that and just thread right into where is the best place for people to find you and what's going on. Give us all the goods.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, if it aligns or resonates, feel free to check out my website is shrinkbigger.com. And there are some freebies, and I send out things like this when I'm on podcasts and meditations and things like that, just for people to have kind of free access to anything. And so you can sign up for the newsletter there or read a little bit more about me and the work that I do there. Or you can
Mhm.
find me on, Instagram at shrinkbigger, or, Google my name and you could probably find it in those ways too. And so that is where you can find me if it
Amazing.
calls to you. Yes.
Oh, it'll call. It'll call. It's calling.
Uh,
Okay, so I'm going to put all of that in the show notes. Yeah. Is there anything else sort of present that you can tune into that wants to be said or shared?
No, I just loved being in your beautiful energy and I love
Mm.
how you flow. And I'm so happy for all of your beautiful success and
Mm.
happiness. And it's been great to just sit here and be in your presence. So thank you for having me.
I feel very much the same. Thank you. And I could actually stay on. We could make this like a multi-hour conversation.
But back anytime you want to chat again, if
Okay.
it resonates, then I would just love to chat with you. I feel the same. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.